A long time ago, in a small little town, there lived an old toy maker named Geppetto. He was a toy maker who carved wooden toys to sell to the townsfolk. He loved blessing children, but was sad that he never had a family of his own. He often wished he would still have a son someday. And one day,
what a perfect
as he
piece
was
of
walking
wood.
in the woods,
With this, I will be able to
he saw
carve
the
a beautiful
perfect
puppet.
log for his next toy project. Geppetto took the log on his back and carried it to his workshop. He put the log on his table and started to carve. But as he was carving, he heard a little voice coming from the log.
Hello!
Geppetto was surprised and thought he must have been hearing voices from the children in the town. Geppetto kept on carving, but then he heard the same voice again.
Hello, hello, hello. Who's calling me?
I must be getting really old.
Hello!
Hello? I'm hearing voices.
Geppetto kept on working, carving one piece at a time. First, he finished the head, then his body, his arms, and his legs and feet. Geppetto finally finished the puppet, set him on a chair, and started to tidy up his workshop. But then he heard the voice again.
Hello? Hello?
Geppetto looked around, stunned,
I'm hello.
but he could not see anybody else than the wooden puppet. So he kept on with his work. And then the new puppet started to move. He jumped down from the chair and started dancing in the room. Geppetto couldn't believe his eyes. Of course, it wasn't a real kid, but it sure laughed, talked, and played like one.
You! My puppet! You're, dancing. Oh.
Geppetto held the puppet in his arms.
From now on, your name shall be Pinocchio, my child.
Geppetto was so happy to have Pinocchio there, and he began to teach him about being a boy. After the summer was over, it was time for Pinocchio to go to school. But Geppetto did not have the money to buy Pinocchio his school supplies, so he sold his coat and gave the money to Pinocchio for buying school books. Pinocchio took the money and joyfully walked through the town, watching all the people in the marketplace and the shops along the way. At the edge of town, he saw a big crowd that had gathered for the circus. To find out what was going on, he walked through the crowd. It wasn't hard, because he was so short, the people didn't notice he was made of wood and just assumed he was a real boy. Pinocchio saw the huge circus tent, with a clown in front calling out to the crowd to come see his show.
Ride up. Come one, come all, see the amazing circus.
Pinocchio thought it sounded like fun, so he went up to the clown. But the clown stopped him and said,
Hey, you can't go to the show. You gotta have the dough. You gotta have money for the ticket.
Pinocchio thought for a while and remembered the money Geppetto gave him for school.
I have money.
He took the money out of his pocket and gave it to the
Yeah,
clown.
that'll do.
Inside the tent, Pinocchio saw a large stage with a puppet show. He thought perhaps those puppets were alive too.
Hey, wooden toys, what are you playing?
Jumping on the stage, Pinocchio started to dance amongst the puppets. But since he wasn't part of the show, the crowd thought he was just a boy messing up the story. But the puppet master, above the stage, could see that he was wooden. He was shocked to see a puppet without strings.
Ah, a puppet out the strings would make me a lot of money.
And as soon as the show was over, he caught Pinocchio and put him in a cage. Pinocchio was very upset that he did not listen to Geppetto to use the money for school books and to go to school. Seeing how regretful Pinocchio was, a fairy appeared right next to him.
Who are you?
I'm the one that brought you to life for Geppetto. You should have done what your father told you to do. I am glad you know that you were wrong to disobey. So I have decided to save you from this cage.
Thank you, Miss Fairy. Can you help me go to school?
The fairy cast a spell, and money appeared in Pinocchio's hand. Go straight to school. Do not waste this money. The fairy took Pinocchio out of the circus. Pinocchio was on his way to school once again and began to sing along the way. Hearing the singing, a shifty fox and his friend the cat stepped out in front of Pinocchio. They saw the money, and they wanted to trick Pinocchio to take his money away.
Hello there. Where are you going so musically?
I'm gonna go buy some school books.
This won't be enough money for school books, but I know a way you can grow more money.
What do you want me to do?
There's a magic field nearby. Give me the money and I'll plant it so you can have a money tree and pick new money whenever you need it.
Pinocchio wasn't very old, and he believed anything the fox had said and gave away his money. The fox and the cat quickly snatched the money and ran away. Pinocchio was left all alone and started to wonder if he had been tricked. And then the fairy appeared again. Why aren't you still at school? Did you get the school books with the money I gave you? The fairy knew that he had given his money away to the fox.
Yeah.
And she warned Pinocchio. Don't lie to me, Pinocchio. Tell me the truth. Pinocchio did not listen to the fairy and chose to lie about the money.
But I bought 4 books, but I left them at school.
As soon as Pinocchio finished his sentence, his nose started to grow. Are you telling the truth? As he told more lies, Pinocchio's nose kept growing longer and longer until it was so long he couldn't even move his head very well. Finally, he realized his nose was growing because he was lying.
My nose! What's going on?
He told the fairy the truth, and she was pleased that he chose the right thing. So she used her magic wand and changed his nose back to the right size. I am forgiving you because you told the truth. The fairy used her wand again to make more money, and once again warned Pinocchio not to waste any more of his money. Do not waste this money. Holding the money in his hand, Pinocchio started walking towards town again. But when he got into town, he ran into the mean puppet master from the circus. The puppet master was very upset that Pinocchio had escaped and thought it would be best if Pinocchio disappeared. So he caught Pinocchio and threw him into the sea.
Wow!
But when Pinocchio fell into the sea, he did not sink. He stayed afloat on the water because he was made of wood.
Oh, I float.
Pinocchio really liked this feeling and started to play and swim in the water.
Whee!
He played so long that suddenly he heard a splash and everything went dark.
Hey, what's going on? Where am I?
Pinocchio suddenly found himself in a dark place. He looked around but could not see a way out. Pinocchio had been swallowed by a giant fish, and now he was sitting right in the middle of his stomach. Back at home, Geppetto was worried about Pinocchio, and he went out to search for him. Eventually, he came to the far side of the town where the seashore was. He asked the fishermen whether they had seen his son or not. One of the fishermen remembered seeing Pinocchio swimming in the water.
Have you seen my son, about this tall, made of wood?
Geppetto asked the fisherman for help.
In the water, over there yonder in the water.
Oh, whoa,
my...
Knowing how good a person Geppetto was, the fishermen wanted to help him, so they gave him a small boat to save Pinocchio. Geppetto jumped on the boat and sailed to the sea. But then it started to rain more and more. Geppetto was in a storm. The small boat couldn't handle the big waves and sunk beneath the water. Geppetto found himself in the middle of the sea. Geppetto could not swim above the giant waves and sank deeper and deeper into the water. But then a giant fish came. It was the fish that had swallowed Pinocchio. And it also swallowed up Geppetto. Geppetto slid down the fish's throat right into his stomach. And then he heard the crying voice of a child. He recognized the voice right away.
Pinocchio! Pinocchio, my son! I finally found you.
Hearing his father's voice,
I was so worried.
Pinocchio hugged Geppetto.
I'm so sorry I didn't listen to you, Daddy. I will always try to do what you say.
The fairy heard Pinocchio say he was sorry and appeared inside the fish to rescue them. She used a magic bubble to take Geppetto and Pinocchio out of the fish's belly, and they floated back to the shore. Pinocchio had become much wiser after all this, and from then on, he always listened to his father. He went to school every day and always came home right away to help his father in his workshop. The fairy saw what a nice boy Pinocchio had become and decided to give him a special gift. One night, when Pinocchio was sleeping, she came next to his bed and used her magic wand. In the morning, Pinocchio woke up to get ready for school, and as he was getting out of bed, he realized that something was different. He saw his hands and legs and feet. He was shocked. He was not made of wood anymore. He was a normal boy, no longer made of wood. He jumped from his bed and joyfully ran next to his father.
Daddy, 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 look at me!
Seeing Pinocchio as a real boy made Geppetto very happy.
Oh, my son, you're a real boy now. Pinocchio!
Father and son hugged each other with tears of joy. Pinocchio always told the truth, and his nose never grew long again.
If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it and you really want to show it. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, stomp your feet. If you're happy and you know it, stomp your feet. If you're happy and you know it and you really want to show it. If you're happy and you know it, stomp your feet. If you're happy and you know it, shout hooray! Hooray! If you're happy and you know it, shout hooray! Hooray! If you're happy and you know it and you really want to show it. If you're happy and you know it, shout hooray! Hooray! If you're happy and you know it, say ha ha! Ha ha! If you're happy and you know it, say ha ha! Ha ha! If you're happy and you know it and you really want to show it. If you're happy and you know it, say ha ha! Ha ha!
Once upon a time, there lived a miller and his beautiful daughter. The miller always dreamt of being rich. Because of this, all he ever did was lie to people around him. The fame of the miller's story went all the way to the king. Calling him to the castle, the king decided to give the miller a lesson. But the miller didn't hesitate on lying to him.
Your Highness, my daughter can turn straw into gold threads.
The king did not believe him.
Okay, if you say so, bring her here tomorrow. Show us how so that we can believe you.
When the miller told his daughter, she was furious. "Father, you lied again! What am I going to do now?" Her father was very embarrassed. The following day, helplessly, the miller and his daughter went to the king. The king took the girl into a room. In the room were a spinning wheel and a basket full of straw for her to string.
By sunrise, I want you to turn all the straw into gold. If you don't, a very big punishment will be waiting for you.
The king had the miller locked in the dungeon. As for his daughter, he placed 2 guards at her door. The girl looked at both the straw and the spinning wheel and helplessly began to cry. "Oh, Daddy!" Suddenly, a light appeared in the room. When the light disappeared, a small, ugly elf appeared. The girl looked at the little man with great confusion.
And why might you be crying?
"The king wants me to turn this straw into gold, but I can't do it."
I can do this for you, but I wonder what you can give me in return.
The girl took her necklace off and gave it to the elf. As soon as the elf got the necklace, he sat in front of the spinning wheel and began to spin the straw. Round and round as the wheel began to spin, the pulley started to fill with golden string. In a short while, the elf turned all the straw into gold, and just as he had appeared, he disappeared. It was now morning. The king entered the room, and once he saw the pulleys, he was amazed.
I thought your father was a liar. He has amazed me.
The girl thought about escaping and was very happy, but the king just brought in more straw.
If you want to be free, you must turn all the straw into gold by morning.
The girl began to cry once again, and the ugly elf appeared.
I can turn these into gold as well, but what will you give me in return?
The girl reached to her precious ring and gave it to the little man. "I can give you this very precious ring, which was given to me by my mother." The elf got the ring and began to spin the straw. Round and round as the wheel turned, the pulley filled with golden string. By the morning, it all finished. The baskets were full of gold. When the king entered the room, he was very happy. This time, he filled the whole room with straw.
If you manage to turn all this straw into gold, I'm going to forgive both you and your father. In fact, I'm going to ask for you to be my queen.
As soon as the king left the room, the elf appeared once again, but this time there was nothing that the girl could give him. The elf said, "After you marry the king, you must give me the child you give birth to. This way I will turn all this straw into gold." Helplessly, the girl accepted his offer. This time round, the elf began to work much faster. Round and round as the spinning wheel spun, the pulley began to fill with gold. It was morning once again, and the king entered. He saw the gold and was very happy. He proposed to the girl. The girl was now a queen. After a short time had passed, the queen had a child. One day when the queen was putting her baby to sleep, the elf appeared.
Did you forget the promise you gave me?
"No, I have not, but please don't take my baby away." The elf felt sorry for the queen and gave her one chance.
If in 3 days you find out what my name is, you can keep your child.
Once the elf disappeared, the queen began to think. She called the guard and got him to make a list of all the names in the country. the guard made a list of all the names on a piece of paper and by morning brought it to the Queen. In the morning, the elf reappeared and asked the Queen what his name was. And so the Queen began to read all the names on the piece of paper. Is it David?
No.
Robert?
No.
Tom?
Nah.
Peter?
No.
After the Queen finished reading out all the names, the elf said,
None of them. I'm leaving now, but I will be back tomorrow.
and he disappeared. The Queen called the guard and this time asked the guard to make a list of all the names in the neighbouring kingdoms. Before it was morning, the guard wrote down all the names he found on a piece of paper and gave it to the Queen. When the sun rose, the elf reappeared.
So, were you able to find my name?
Balthazar!
No.
Hans!
No.
Mustafa! Gustav! No matter how many names she counted, she just couldn't find it.
Tomorrow is the last day. I'll be back. But you don't stand a chance.
The elf disappeared once again. The Queen called the guard and this time asked that they travelled more countries and got more names. At sunrise, the guard made his way to the Queen and began to explain all that he had seen the night before.
While I was walking in the forest, I saw a small house and there were talking trees. And the dwarf jumping around the fire singing a song. The baby will be mine, she will be my sunshine. For this moment I've been waiting, my name is Rumpelstiltskin.
The Queen was very happy to hear all that was said. And so it was morning, and the elf reappeared. When he asked the Queen what his name was, the Queen made it as if she didn't know his name, and began to count different names. Shaking his head, the elf kept on saying no. As the Queen got the wrong answers, he just got happier and happier. In the end, the Queen said his name. Is it Rumpelstiltskin?
But, how could you have known? This can't be. A wizard must have told you. Yes, a wizard.
The elf stomped his foot on the ground and the floor cracked and his foot got buried. Then as he tried to get away, he stomped his other foot and the floor cracked even more. And down he went. Finally, the Queen got rid of the greedy elf and later went over to the king and honestly explained all that had happened. The king saw that the Queen regretted what had happened and so he forgave her. As for her father, the king thought the right thing to do was to punish him. And so he sent him far away out of the kingdom. And so the king, queen, and their child lived a wealthy and healthy life.
Давным-давно, далеко в стране эльфов, жили 3 эльфа. Они хотели творить добро и дарить радость людям. Для этого они решили отправиться в мир людей.
Наш долг зовет нас. Ребята, идем. Я так взволнован. Наконец-то и мы тоже увидим мир людей.
Я хочу сделать счастливым каждого человека на свете.
Если мы поможем людям и сделаем их счастливыми, мы сразу станем добрыми волшебниками.
А в одном старом доме жил старик со своей старухой. Он был башмачником и шил башмаки в мастерской у себя дома. а иногда чинил старые башмаки. Однажды башмачник купил на заработанные деньги новую кожу, чтобы сшить новые башмаки. Купив кожу на заработанные деньги, он вернулся домой. Куска кожи, которую он купил, хватало только на одну пару башмаков. Он оставил этот кусок на столе в мастерской, запер дверь и отправился в спальню. Утром башмачник проснулся, потянулся, сидя в кровати, и стал размышлять о том, какие башмаки он хочет сшить. Он, как обычно, съел завтрак, который ему приготовила жена.
Спасибо, дорогая. А теперь мне нужно поработать. Сегодня я сошью прекрасную пару башмаков.
Прошлой ночью ты уже сшил пару башмаков. Неужели у тебя осталось достаточно кожи на еще одну пару?
Старик очень удивился. Он знал, что вчера перед сном не шил никаких башмаков. Он поспешил в мастерскую, чтобы выяснить, в чем дело. И что же он увидел, открыв дверь? Вчерашний кусок кожи исчез со стола. Вместо него на столе оказались очаровательные башмаки. У башмачника глаза вылезли из орбит от удивления.
Но я не помню, чтобы шил эти башмаки. Кажется, я начинаю сходить с ума от старости.
Башмаки были так прекрасны, что башмачник тут же выдрузил их на витрину и стал ожидать покупателей. Вскоре богато одетый человек увидел башмаки на витрине лавки и вошел внутрь.
Добрый день. Я хотел бы купить пару башмаков, тех, что стоят у вас на витрине. Неважно, сколько они стоят, это лучшая пара башмаков из всех, что я видел.
Старик с радостью продал башмаки. И он попросил за них не больше, чем они стоили. На этот раз башмачник купил кожи на 2 пары башмаков. И снова оставил кусок на столе в мастерской. Однако перед тем, как отправиться спать, тщательно оглядел мастерскую и еще раз бросил взгляд на стол. Проснувшись, он побежал прямиком в мастерскую. И на этот раз он увидел на столе 2 пары превосходных башмаков. Башмачник потерял дар речи от счастья. Он выложил обе пары башмаков на витрине. И в этот же день продал обе пары башмаков по очень хорошей цене. Он снова отправился за кожей. Конечно же, не переставая думать о том, кто же шьет для него такие бесподобные башмаки. И на этот раз он оставил кусок кожи на столе и отправился в свою комнату. Утром он обнаружил несколько пар прекрасных башмаков в мастерской. В этот же день он продал все. На деньги, вырученные из башмаков, башмачник смог прожить довольно долго. А на часть этих денег он купил еще кожи. Но любопытство не давало ему покоя. Ему хотелось узнать, кто же шил для него ночами эти чудесные башмаки. Что ж, однажды ночью он решил спрятаться в мастерской и разгадать эту тайну.
Этой ночью я наконец-то увижу этого загадочного мастера.
После полуночи открылось окошко в мастерской, и в нее проникли эльфы. Один из них случайно уронил с подоконника цветочный горшок. Старик же приоткрыл дверь и выглянул из своего укрытия.
Нужно быть осторожнее, ты же разбудишь его.
Он не поверил своим глазам. На столе мастерской трудились, пританцовывая, 3 маленьких эльфов. Один из них резал кожу, другой шил, а третий клеил. В конце они завязали шнурки и наполировали башмаки. Эльфы работали так быстро, что в мгновение ока на столе оказалась целая куча новых башмаков.
Все они прекрасны.
Давайте поскорее уйдем, пока никто не проснулся.
Эльфы выбрались тем же путем, каким проникли в мастерскую, танцуя, радуясь и смеясь. А башмачник выбрался из своего укрытия, побежал к жене и рассказал обо всем, что видел. Конечно же, жена не могла поверить своим ушам. Но когда она увидела множество прекрасных новых башмаков на столе, она поняла, что ее супруг не смог бы сшить столько всего за одну ночь. Они решили поблагодарить эльфов за все, что те для них сделали. На следующий день жена старого башмачника накрыла праздничный стол. В полночь, когда эльфы снова появились в мастерской, они увидели лакомство.
Посмотрите, сколько еды. Думаете, это все для нас?
Конечно же, для нас, глупенький. Иначе зачем бы они оставили все это здесь в такой час?
Думаю, что мы справились со своей задачей в этом доме. Теперь мы можем идти в другие дома, которым нужна наша помощь.
Башмачник и его жена проснулись поутру и отправились в мастерскую. И вместо накрытого стола они увидели множество пар прекрасных башмаков. С тех пор эльфы больше не возвращались в этот дом. Старый башмачник и его жена могли жить на вырученные с продажи башмаков деньги всю оставшуюся жизнь. Старик же подумал, что это была лучшая награда за столько лет тяжелого труда. Он никогда не прекращал шить башмаки. И всякий раз вспоминал о маленьких эльфах с благодарностью и лаской.
Once upon a time, there lived an arrogant and vain emperor in a faraway kingdom. This emperor loved clothes and spent all his money for chic clothing so that he always looked good. He spent most of his time in front of the mirror trying on new clothes.
How do I look, head tailor? Does it fit me? Of course it does, my emperor. Whatever you try on fits you well.
The emperor's kingdom was a very fun place to be. There were colourful fabrics, accessories, and souvenirs sold in the market. One day, 2 con men came by to the market, and they introduced themselves as weavers who produce the world's best fabrics. And of course, they knew the emperor's desires for new clothes and unique fabrics. They immediately started a rumour in the market. The rumour said that the clothes they make with their special fabrics had a very important specialty. People who were not fit for their jobs and the ones who were fools could not see these clothes. Of course, the emperor immediately heard about this rumour.
Amazing, amazing. If I wear these clothes, I will be able to tell immediately which of my stuff really deserves their title, and also I can differentiate the stupid from the wise. Call these tailors immediately!
So the fake weavers came to meet the emperor.
I want you to make me a magnificent suit from the most unique fabric you have. If I like it, I would pay more than you ask for, but if I don't... Do not worry, Your Highness. We will make a suit for you that is truly as unique as it can be, and that has no match.
Your Highness, do you prefer a color or should we choose?
You choose, and start to work immediately. They will make a payment for your initial costs.
The weavers immediately set a workshop and supposedly began to work, but there was nothing to be seen. They asked to purchase golden threads and finest of silk and all kinds of jewellery, but they put all that they received in their bags and worked until late. on the empty loom. The emperor was curious and wanted to see how the weavers were going with his new suit. But he felt insecure and anxious about the fact that fools and the ones who were not fit for their jobs cannot see the suit.
Actually, I have nothing to worry about. Still, let me send my most trusted minister. He is very wise and also is my best minister.
So the good-hearted and honest minister came into the room where the two conmen were working on the empty looms. He opened his eyes wide, but could it really be that in fact he really couldn't see nothing? He couldn't tell anyone. The two conmen asked the minister to come closer.
Please tell us, sir, have you ever seen such beautiful designs in such magnificent colors before? Well, I have to be honest with you. Truly, I have not seen anything like these designs and the colors. They're incredible. Our emperor will love it.
All that being said, the minister thought to himself, I am either a fool or I am not worthy of a minister to the emperor. With no other option, he left the room without saying anything. The emperor curiously waited for his minister's comments. Finally, the minister approached the emperor and began to tell him about the beauty of the design and the incredible colors of the suit. The emperor was very happy. This way, the weavers could ask for more golden threads and silk, which of course they put in their bags. There was not a single thread to be seen in the loom, but still the weavers kept on working. After some time had passed, the emperor sent another trusted minister to see how the progress was going and if the suit was ready. The minister also had a hard look at the room, but because there was nothing else than an empty loom, he too could not see anything.
Such a beautiful fabric, right?
The minister began to think hard.
I am definitely not a fool, but I think I am not fit for my work. This is very bad, but I shouldn't tell anyone.
Returning next to the emperor, the minister also began to praise the suit he could not see, and he added how mesmerized he was by the beauty of the colors and the unique design of the suit. The emperor, of course, was very happy that he could not wait to see it. Everyone in the kingdom was talking about this magnificent fabric. Everybody knew that only the wise could see it. Finally, the king wanted to see the fabric too, so he took his ministers with him and went into the room where the weavers were working. Working hard on the empty loom, the shifty conmen saluted the emperor. Both of the ministers began to talk before the emperor.
Well, it is truly something absolutely priceless, right? Yes, the more it is woven, the better it looks. Look at this design and colors. My emperor, what do you think?
The emperor took a long and hard look at the empty loom and of course thought that everybody else could see the fabric.
What does this mean? I can't see anything. It's impossible. Am I a fool? Or am I not fit to be a king?
These were the thoughts of the emperor, but the words came out differently.
Wow, so beautiful, so exquisite, the most magnificent thing I have ever seen.
The ministers next to him, they of course had to support their emperor by saying, "Wow, it is so beautiful and exquisite." The conman suggested the emperor to wear this new suit in the upcoming celebration, and the emperor had no choice but to accept. The whole kingdom was waiting anxiously to see the emperor's new suit. Everybody was praising the weavers. The emperor also awarded the weavers with a medal and gave them the title of the Secret Weavers of the Palace. One day before the big celebration, the two conmen worked all night long until sunrise. And everybody saw how much they worked to finish the new suit of the emperor. In the morning, the emperor gathered his most trusted men and came next to the weavers.
Your suit is ready, Your Highness.
The two conmen put their arms up, supposedly showing something. They said, "These are the pants, the jacket, and the cape," and showed one by one the non-existent clothing. The emperor and his men couldn't say a word.
They're all as light as a spider's web. One thinks that he's wearing nothing, but that is the biggest specialty of this fabric.
Your Majesty, please allow us to dress you this suit ourselves. Can you please kindly take off your clothes?
The emperor took his clothes off, and they supposedly began dressing him up. Well, actually, they pretended to. Finally, one of the conmen tied his cape. The emperor turned right and left in front of the mirror, then turned around and looked at his men. Everybody began to clap.
Oh, my Emperor. Look at these colors.
This is great.
So wow.
Beautiful.
I love these colors. It's incredible. Amazing. Wow.
The emperor looked at himself in the mirror once again, because he had to look like he was admiring how good he looked.
Yes, I think it really looks good. Okay, I'm ready then.
The emperor's men pretended they were holding the tail of the cape, but they weren't supposed to make it obvious that they weren't seeing anything. So they all went out. All the people on the streets began to yell about how incredibly beautiful the emperor's new suit was. Nobody dared to say that he wasn't wearing anything, because if they did, they would either lose their jobs or get called a fool. Right at that moment, a kid in the crowd yelled,
But the king isn't wearing anything.
The king, his ministers, soldiers, and the people froze for a second.
Look, the king is naked.
These were the words of an innocent young child. Only he could tell the truth of such situation. Then the child's father called out,
It's true, the king hasn't got any clothes on. He's naked.
In the end, everybody gathered their courage and began to yell, "The king is naked! The king is naked!"
The king is naked.
The king had come to terms with the ugly truth, but did not make it obvious, and carried on with his head up high. And of course the ministers carried on pretending to carry his cape. The king just walked on by like nothing had happened. The two weaving conmen had already left the very proud king's country, taking away with them the precious stones, fabrics, and of course the golden threads. Once upon a time, in a beautiful town located at the very top, there was the statue of the Happy Prince. The statue was covered with gold from head to toe, and there was a big red ruby on the handle of his sword. And as for the prince's eyes, they were two sparkling green emeralds. The statue of the Happy Prince could be seen by everyone in town, and it was known to spread hope and happiness to all. One night, a little swallow came to town. Her friends flew to warmer parts of the world to be protected from the cold, but she was left behind. She saw the statue, which was resting on a big column.
Let me spend the night here. Tomorrow I'll continue.
The swallow landed right between the happy prince's feet.
Tonight I'm going to sleep in a golden bed.
When she was getting ready to sleep, putting her wing over her head, suddenly a drop of water fell on her head. She looked up, but the sky was clear and it wasn't raining. Right at that moment, another drop of water landed on her beak, followed by another. To understand what was going on, the swallow flew up on the statue's head. She saw that the drops were coming from the prince's eyes. They were his teardrops. Happy Prince's teardrops were running down on his cheek and dropping on his feet. And his sad eyes were sparkling in the moonlight. The swallow felt really sad for him.
Hello, and who are you?
I am the Happy Prince.
And then why are you crying?
When I was alive and my heart was a human heart, I never shed a tear because I lived in a palace where we did not know what sadness was. During the day, I used to play with my friends in the garden, and at nighttime, I would dance in the big ballroom. There was a big wall surrounding the garden, but I never wondered what was behind the wall. Everything around me was so beautiful, and they always called me Happy Prince, and I was very happy indeed. However, when my life ended, they put me here on top of this hill, and now I can see all the ugliness and the poverty around me. Although my heart is made of lead, there is nothing I can do but cry.
The swallow was very sad.
There is a torn down small house in a little alley far from here. One of the windows is open, and I can see a woman working on the sewing machine. Her face is weak and tired. On the corner of the bed, her little son is lying down sick. He has fever, but his mother has no money. Dear swallow, can you take out the precious ruby on my sword's handle and take it to her?
After a little bit of rest, I must keep flying to warmer countries.
At least stay here tonight. Tomorrow you can go wherever you want.
Although the swallow was already cold and did not have any rest, she could not do anything but help the sad, happy prince. So with the help of her beak, the swallow took the ruby out of the handle from the prince's sword and flew into town over the dark midnight sky. Finally, she arrived to the townhouse and looked inside. The baby boy was in his bed, struggling with a fever, and his mother was sleeping. She flew inside and put the big ruby on the table right in front of her. Then she flew over to the boy, and flapping her wings, she cooled him down a little bit. The swallow returned next to the happy prince and told him all about what had happened.
When she wakes up, she will see the precious stone, and so she will be able to buy medicine and food for her boy. Thank you very much. Now you can sleep easy tonight, dear swallow.
It was morning now. Right when she was getting ready to fly away, the happy prince stopped the swallow.
Hey, swallow! Dear swallow, can't you just stay one more night?
I need to fly to the warmer countries as soon as possible and find my family and friends.
Far away on the other side of the town, I see a young man in a small attic. He is sitting at a table full of paper and pale violets in a small glass. This is a young writer and he's trying to finish his new book, but he doesn't have any wood to burn or a piece of bread to eat. Don't you want to help him?
The good-hearted swallow accepted to stay one more night just to help the young writer.
Unfortunately, I have no more rubies left, but my eyes are from a very precious stone called emerald. Take one of them and bring it to the writer.
Hearing this made the swallow very sad. She did not accept it at first, but when the happy prince insisted, she had no choice. So she took the emerald out with her beak. Then she started to fly towards the house the happy prince was talking about. When she arrived, the young man was sitting at the table restless with his hands covering his face. He did not hear the bird's wings flapping. When he looked up, he saw the green sparkly emerald on top of the pale violets. He thought that one of his fans who liked his writing left it there. So he took the emerald and stood up with joy.
I came to say goodbye.
Dear Swallow, can't you stay just one more night?
It is almost winter. It's going to snow soon. I really have to go. My dear prince, I need to fly away, but I will never forget you.
Okay, but I have one last wish from you. Please do it for me. On the square down below, there's a little girl selling matches, but she dropped them all into the water and they all got wet. Now if she cannot bring home some money, her dad will be very upset and they too will be hungry tonight. She's there crying. She doesn't even have shoes or socks or a hat covering her head. Take my other eye, give it to her so they will be okay.
Hearing this story, the swallow decided to stay one more night.
Okay, one last time, but I can't take your eye out. Then you won't be able to see.
It hurts me more to see the hungry and helpless people around me. So please do as I say.
Taking out his other eye, the swallow began flying down. She flew slowly next to the girl and dropped the emerald in her hand. The girl shouted, "Oh, what a beautiful piece of glass!" and ran home with joy. After that, the little swallow came back next to the happy prince.
I decided to stay next to you and be your eyes from now on.
The prince asked the swallow to fly over the whole town and inform him about all that was happening. The swallow flew over the town and saw that while the rich people were sitting in their warm houses, the poor were trying to light a fire in the cold to get warm. When she went into the dark alleys, she saw the weak faces of hungry kids. Under a bridge, she saw the two little kids sleeping on each other's laps and trying to warm each other up. Then she went back and told all about it to the prince.
I am covered with pure gold. Just peel them off and bring it to the poor. They think that gold makes you happy, but actually, to be healthy and content is what makes you happy.
The swallow began to peel off all the gold from the prince's statue until the prince looked weak and miserable. And she gave all the gold to the poor on the streets. Meanwhile, it began to snow. The streets were full of snow. The swallow kept on helping the poor every night by peeling off the gold from the prince, until there was nothing left. The poor little swallow was freezing, but she did not want to leave the prince alone. She loved him dearly, but in the end she knew that she was going to die. She used the last bit of strength she had left and flew up to the prince's shoulder.
Goodbye, dear prince.
So you decided to fly to the warmer countries after all, my friend?
The little swallow could not tell the prince where she was going, so she kissed him slowly on the cheek and fell on the ground next to him. Right that moment, there was a cracking noise coming from inside the happy prince's statue. It was his heart of lead breaking into pieces. When it was morning, everybody gathered around the statue of the happy prince, and they were looking at him with amazement. Then they all saw the lifeless body of the swallow laying down next to his feet. Everybody was so sad. But then they heard a voice amongst the crowd. It was the young writer.
Now I understand why the happy prince is in this shape. He and his little swallow sacrificed themselves for our happiness. So stay happy and don't be sad. The two most beautiful hearts in this town were their hearts. And it will forever stay that way.
It was a cold and snowy New Year's night. The people were passing by with their warm coats, gloves and scarves. They were all in a rush to get somewhere. Some were late and rushing to get home, and some were going to a venue to celebrate the new year. Children were running around on the streets throwing snowballs to each other. Of course, they were the ones enjoying the snow the most. They were playing with each other and laughing hysterically. But on the streets, there was a girl, different than the ones that were playing. This little girl was standing in the middle of the street, watching the other kids play. She did not have a hat to protect her from the cold like others. Her clothes were light and ripped, and the slippers on her feet didn't fit her right. They were big. She was holding a box in her hands, shivering from the freezing cold. The little girl barely noticed the car coming right at her.
Hey kids, stay on the side of the road, you're gonna get run over.
The little girl threw herself on the sidewalk that second. But while she was running, the very big slippers on her feet flew off. When she was on the sidewalk, she turned around and looked. She saw a boy running with her slippers. "My slippers!" She yelled and ran after him, but the kid ran away fast. "Hey, stop!" Having no choice but to walk barefoot, she sought for a shelter next to a wall. She opened the box she had been holding and she put it down. She was looking in the box full of matches with her eyes watery from the cold. This was a little match girl, but she could not even sell one box of matches that day. If she could make a sale and earn some money, she could go home and have at least a bowl of warm soup with her mother. So she started yelling with her thin, shivering voice from cold and sadness. "Matches! Matches! Anyone wants matches? Matches!" Nobody on the street paid any attention to her, so she sat down next to the wall. Her fingers started to ache from the cold. She could not bear the pain anymore. Somehow, she had to warm up. She opened a box and pulled out a match. Her fingers were numb, and she could barely hold a match. With her shivering hands, she lit the match on the wall, and suddenly a warm orange light surrounded her. Poor girl passed the match from one hand to the other to warm her fingers. Her hands were not cold anymore. She found herself in front of a burning stove. She stared at the fire and started dreaming. She was sitting in front of a big stove in a beautiful room. She had a woolen sweater on her, furry boots on her feet, and a beanie on her head. It was so hot she began to sweat. But suddenly, the match went out. With the match out, those sweet dreams also vanished. Her little fingers began to freeze and ache once again. She lit up another match. At that moment, a cold wind blew. The little girl turned to the wall to keep the match from going out, and she covered the fire with her hands. Whilst she was looking at it, the wall suddenly vanished and opened up. There was a big room inside. There were all sorts of food spread on a table with a white cloth, and the silver candlesticks on the table lit up the room like daylight. She stared at the table and saw that in the middle of the table there was a beautifully grilled big piece of meat. She immediately ripped a piece of it and put it in her mouth. Suddenly, she wasn't hungry anymore. The little match girl wanted to take another piece of meat. She reached out, but the match she had in her hand went out pretty fast. Poor girl's hand burned and she threw the match away.
Ow! Ow!
As soon as she threw away the match, the feast on the table and the room vanished. The wall reappeared. Little match girl lit another match. Now she was in an even bigger dream. She was sitting under a tree on a summer night, looking at the stars above. It was still warm, even though it was night time. The little girl could not take her eyes off of the stars. She never saw the sky and the stars so clear and sparkling before. Then suddenly, she saw a shooting star. She thought to herself, "There goes another one of us flying into eternity." These were actually her grandmother's words. At that moment, she saw her grandmother appear.
When you see a shooting star, know that someone will take its place, my dear.
Her grandmother was visible for a brief moment, and then when she disappeared, the little match girl called after her.
Grandmother, stop! Don't go! Don't go, please! I really missed you!
To see her grandmother one more time, she lit up another match. She forgot how she was freezing from cold in the middle of the street and started dreaming once again. Every time she lit up a match, she felt as if she was seeing her grandmother and hearing her voice. The little girl lit up another match. Her surroundings lit up like daylight. She never saw her grandmother this beautiful before. Her loving face made her forget all the cold and bitter days she had ever been through. She did not want this moment to finish, so she lit up the final match in a hurry. Her grandmother appeared in front of her again. She reached out her arms to hold the little match girl's hand. They started to fly up into the sky together. The little girl felt a sudden relief. There was no cold or hunger anymore. At that moment, another shooting star went on by. In the morning, the people who passed by on the street saw the little match girl laying down by the wall, her eyes closed but with a sweet smile on her face. She had a lot of burnt matches around her. The matches which, with their flames, brought her dreams alive that no one would ever dream about.